activities, say for example in weapons. So we had to contact the company and ensure and have clear, detailed audit path on the data for them to demonstrate how they use how they use lenses, and we have confirmation or corroboration of this. And only with that and that clear trail on that are we able to determine and with confidence that Fuji is a Sharia compliant business and one that can be invested in. What's the last point? The last point I talked about Sheikh Hussein Hassan. Very important to us is we did something very unique as well. So I've talked a lot about the methodology, and I've also talked about criteria. We wanted to put a real signal out there to say that what we've done has been put together very well. So we a unique position to have a fatwa on our product, and that fatwa offers an opinion both on the methodology as well as the screening criteria that we've put together. Okay. I think I've probably talked through most things here, but this is a schematic which, if you have the slides afterwards, you can refer back to. You can see the kind of the standard data coming in, the screening for financial compliance and business activity compliance, the in-depth business activity analysis to give our output, and I may come back to additional services later, and testing that runs throughout the process. So for a product like the Sharia capital markets products, now this is an integral part of what they offer, as well as some very elaborate and careful product development they have on their own side. They have to be able to depend on a safe and secure Sharia screening product, something which removes Sharia risk from their standpoint, but also from the end investor standpoint, and hence our partnership. So we provide the screening results to the product, which you'll hear more about shortly. Total debt on total assets, which needs to be more than a threshold of 33%. But you also have the converse thing, so not only how much debt or interest are you paying away, but how much are you receiving through your interest-bearing securities. So ratio 2 is effectively the converse of that. And the third one is the monetary assets. So there needs to be a sense or a measure of tradability, which that third ratio relates to. We keep going through, but afterwards you can read through these slides. It tells more information about business activity. The next one will talk about more about financial or manual screening. And again, if we keep moving, thanks. This is evidence of the fatwa I referred to. Sheikh Hassan having gone through very carefully on the process and worked very closely on this for the fatwa we have from nearly 2 years ago now. Mehdi, what have you written there? Thank you, this is good. Amiri SQ design principles reflect the expertise of Amiri Capital. So we've been players in this space, myself personally for more than 5 years, and Bindesh, my business partner, for nearly 10 years. But very much the people we depend on to provide us guidance. I mentioned Humayun over the years, Sheikh Hassan as well. But we also, we really understand that any player, whether it's somewhere like Sharia, UMEX, or the underlying managers or investors using the system, really need to know that you've got a dependable product, and that's very important to us. And our investment in the fatwa reflects that. And it's a market-proven product, which, as well as being used for our own funds, we currently license, to various other parties. The likes of Bloomberg, Emirates Bank, the largest bank in the Middle East, a series of other clients, Saudi family offices. So there's a lot of people who use it. So maybe we can have just quickly one or two questions if anyone has anything.
Yeah, you mentioned about financial, one of the two criteria, but financial ratio, you mentioned 33%. Mm-hmm. Is that what it is, or is leverage? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I have to be very careful. I remember offering an opinion to this to a very eminent member of a Iraqi family, and who shouted me out of the room. So I have to be very careful. No, but as part of the governing family. But if I can deferentially say that it comes from from the Hadith, and perhaps Hermione would want to step in to talk about it in a more articulated manner. But there's a common reference point around, 1/3 being a relevant threshold, and that has been utilised as a quite consistently as the threshold for these ratios, but not exclusively. Different people have different scholars advise differently in different situations. So some ratios may have a higher number. Some scholars advise on a lower, but broad consensus would be 1/3.
How do they determine the ratio, whether it's 30%, 35%, 40%? It sounds like.
I think that's what I was just trying to answer. So rather than saying something incorrect, I mean, if perhaps Hermione has something to add on that, then that may be helpful.
It's basically, the first thing is this is an arbitrary figure, right? In order to get some kind of Sharia legitimacy, the scholars went for a hadith which says that 1/3 is enough, is sufficient. Otherwise, there is no Sharia grounds for using 1/3 or half and so on. This has over the years become a consistent practice in Islamic finance that 1/3 is considered as an acceptable threshold. As Richard said, in case of, for example, second ratio, which is cash plus interest-bearing securities divided by market cap, this is actually 49%. The Sharia principle is that if in an activity non-Sharia elements are majority, that is not acceptable. The 33% figure is conservative. They say, all right, okay, we wouldn't go for 49%, rather we go for 1/3, which is a guideline which loosely comes from one of the sayings of the Prophet.
Now, in definition of debt, how do you treat convertible bonds, for example?
As long as the bonds, whether this is convertible or simple, as long as this is interest-based, so that would be considered as non-Sharia debt.
So if it's pay in kind, how does that work?
Whether this is paid in kind or in cash, as long as this falls under the definition of riba or interest, that would be considered as Sharia repugnant.
And also, I mean, the next step along that kind of continuum is that we have adopted under the guidance of Sheikh Hassan a conservative position. So preference shares as well would be treated as effectively a debt component. So we're going to.
Zero coupon, would it?
Yeah. So if we could effectively, determine that, then we could treat it in that instance as equity. But yeah.
Do you have any challenges? Are there any gray zones where your methodology cannot be applied to for one region or for the other, or is that?
Well, what we've found is that everyone has lots of views early on, but actually in practice, most people are happy with what we've done. So the significant majority would agree with it. Refer back to my fatwa. We have a core set of criteria which Sheikh Hassan has offered his opinion on, but his opinion on the methodology also means that it's been developed in a flexible way, and he supports the implementation of different business activity interpretations should a client want that. So most would agree with be happy with our core criteria, but his view was that we've developed the system in a way that we are able to deliver to people who have different preferences. For the most part, we haven't had to do that, but we did invest quite considerably for a Malaysian client to take on board the very different views there, where you have different levels of permissibility, according to each business activity. So that's actually a point I didn't perhaps make clear enough, is that the business activities side of things, there is a broad consensus to have a 5% aggregate maximum on the amount of haram business activity that you're allowed. Well, in Malaysia, some business activities can be done at 5%, some at 10%, some at 20%. They're a little bit more flexible on some activity. So yes, we did invest on delivering for that client.
As a fund manager who's like pitch stock, stock that was formerly met the criteria but now falls out of it, would that be detrimental to the investor?
Yeah, it's a very good question. A very, very real issue that that managers face. I think largely to the credit of Islamic finance and the scholars who lead the thinking is Islamic finance is pragmatic, and it that doesn't get overly punitive. So let's look at two different types of situations. First one is if you, as a manager, invest in a stock that is actually haram, and let's just say you did a mistake. At that point, the scholars say you need to unwind that position straight away. Call it one trading day. But if you invest in a stock that is halal, that changes status, which is what you're referring to, the guidance is you're allowed up to 60 days to get out of that position. I'm conscious of time, so perhaps I can pick up on other questions later. But
Richard, thank you very much. Okay, I think next, moving on from the fund structures to Sharia screening, how does Sharia compliant equities perform?
Good afternoon. My name's Simon Kira-Watson. I'm the CEO of Sharia UMEX. UMEX Capital Markets Group has two different entities that actually run business operations. One is an information basis, which is Sharia UMEX, and then we have a trading basis company, which is UMEX Securities. UMEX Securities run share trading platforms, as well as for UK residents at the moment, a share trading service, so share dealing service, which is actually run via the Share Centre. Sophie in the corner is from the Share Centre this afternoon. What I'd like to talk to you about effectively is, if you could go on to the next slide please, sir, is investment in Sharia compliant equities. There are 3 points that I want to talk about first of all, and I'll try and whiz through as quickly as possible because we're running a bit behind. First one is why invest? If Sharia compliant equity investment is to become more mainstream, i.e. it's going to be accepted by the Islamic community, there are several issues that need to be addressed. First of all, the reason for investing. I think and it's not just in Sharia investment, it's in Sharia finance as well, or Islamic finance in the banking industry in the UK. There's been this almost accepted premise: if you build it, they will come. If you build products, people will invest in it, or people will use them for the banking industry. For the banking industry that's been running now for several years, it hasn't happened to the extent that people were expecting it to. And a lot of the Islamic community have carried on using traditional banking. And what we're looking at is saying, okay, well, how can we make sure that Islamic finance or Islamic investment is embraced by the Muslim community? And the first thing that you're looking at is people only invest for one reason, and that is to make money, rather than, well, if you give them lots of things to put their money into that happen to be Sharia compliant, they'll put their money into it. It doesn't work like that. So people will look at, I've got to make money as a reason for investing. Secondly, how to invest. I'd like to talk about one of the things we need to do is empower the investor. By this I mean give them the information and the tools that they need to be able to make reasoned investment decisions, which is another thing that the industry is extremely good at hiding, is how do you access the information. And the third one, what to invest in. UMEX Securities has developed a fully integrated share trading platform that my colleague Selvan Saha is going to talk about later on, which is more institutional rather than retail. That doesn't mean retail people can't use it, but it's a bit too expensive at the moment. But we are looking at developing other products. If you can go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that we looked at last year was effectively taking the screened universe from Amiri in the UK and working out, well, how have these stocks and shares performed? And once again, this is something that the industry is very good at hiding, is, well, how have they performed? It's very difficult to get information on that. There are approximately, once you've gone through the screening, 200 companies on the London Stock Exchange that are Sharia compliant, and a further 300 on AIM.